In the dead of night, a teenage girl sends a desperate text to her mother and sister. "Mom, I'm scared." Minutes later, 2 gunshots pierce the darkness, and 16-year-old Lauren Juma's promising young life is extinguished, not by a stranger, but by someone who should have protected her.
Now to a developing story from North Harris County involving a 16-year-old Nimitz High School cheerleader who was shot and killed inside a home. Her mother's boyfriend is now accused of pulling the trigger. Joining us now live outside where this tragedy took place is KPRC2's Rochelle Turner. And Rochelle, you spoke with the teen's mother today.
Keith, over the phone, Lauren's mother was too distraught and upset to talk about what happened, but she told me that her daughter was loved by many and she's already missed.
A high school sophomore with dreams of joining the military, Lauren was vibrant, loving, and full of potential. But in the early morning hours of April 2022, that future was stolen, allegedly by the man her mother had trusted with her daughter's safety, her own boyfriend, 60-year-old Van Brisbane. This is the story of Lauren Juma, a bright young woman whose life was cut tragically short in her own home, allegedly by the man who should have been her protector and guardian in her mother's absence. Welcome to Law Crime Stories, where we shed light on the darkest true crime stories to seek justice for victims and understanding for families left behind. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to support our efforts to bring these important stories to light. Lauren Juma was more than just a victim. At 16, she embodied the promise and potential of youth. A sophomore at Nimitz High School in Houston, Texas, Lauren was described by those who knew her as vibrant, caring, and determined.
Yeah, I met her in the 7th grade. When she first moved here, we was all cool. We used to play basketball, you know what I mean? Outside, used to just chill. But she was cool. She nice, you know, very loving.
Born in 2005 to a loving mother who worked tirelessly to provide for her family, Lauren had grown into a young woman with remarkable character. Her childhood friends recall her as always being the one to stand up for others, a quality that followed her into adolescence. Even as a young child, she displayed the kind of empathy and strength that would define her short life. Teachers from her elementary school years remember her infectious laugh and the way she could brighten even the gloomiest days with her presence. Lauren had clear goals for her future. She had joined her school's ROTC program and had expressed dreams of serving her country in the military after graduation. Her instructors noted her discipline and dedication to the program, qualities that made her stand out among her peers. Lauren approached her ROTC training with the same determination she brought to everything in life. She would arrive early to practice, meticulously maintaining her uniform to regulation standards. Her commanding officer had taken notice of her leadership potential, recently recommending her for a summer leadership program that she would never get to attend. In her journal found after her death, Lauren had written about her hopes of eventually becoming an officer and perhaps even attending a military academy. Her bedroom walls featured posters of female military leaders alongside typical teenage pop culture icons, a testament to the duality of her life as both an ordinary teenager and a young woman with extraordinary ambitions. What defined Lauren most was her connection to family. As a daughter and sister, she was the bright spot in her family's life, often making everyone laugh with her outgoing personality and infectious energy. Her smile could light up a room, a fact mentioned repeatedly by those who knew her best. Lauren lived primarily with her mother, who worked night shifts to support the family. Her older sister, who had moved out earlier, remained closely connected to Lauren, the two sharing the special bond that sisters often do. They spoke daily, texting about school, friends, and the everyday concerns of teenage life. According to teachers and classmates, Lauren was the kind of student who balanced academics with an active social life. She wasn't just existing, she was fully living, embracing each day with the enthusiasm that made her special to so many. Her teachers recognized that spark in her, that potential to achieve great things in whatever path she chose. It was this vibrant life, filled with potential and promise, that would be tragically cut short on a night that began like any other in the Houston suburb she called home. The relationship between Lauren's mother and 60-year-old Van Brisbane had introduced a new dynamic into the family's life. Brisbane had been dating Lauren's mother for approximately a year, and during that time he had moved into their family home. Lauren's mother worked night shifts, often leaving Brisbane as the adult in the home with her teenage daughter. It was an arrangement born of necessity and trust, a trust that, according to prosecutors, would be violated in the most horrific way possible. Friends of the family later explained that Lauren's mother was simply trying to make a living working those overnight hours. She trusted Brisbane to look after the house and be there if Lauren needed anything during the night. It was a common scenario in many working families, where partners share responsibilities including childcare. The exact nature of Lauren's relationship with Brisbane before the tragedy remains complex. Family members have since reported that there were no obvious warning signs of violence that would predict the horror to come. They never saw this coming. There were no red flags that anyone could identify. Brisbane seemed normal in their interactions, which makes the subsequent events all the more devastating. Brisbane, at 60 years old, had no documented history of violent crime that would have raised immediate concerns.
I love my uncle to death. I swear I do. But I will never be able to understand how he did something like this to Lauren. He loved Lauren and Lauren loved the life out of him. How he could take her life from her, I can never understand.
He had met Lauren's mother through mutual friends approximately 14 months before the tragedy. The early stages of their relationship had progressed normally, with Brisbane initially living separately and only occasionally visiting the family home. It was approximately 6 months into the relationship when economic practicalities led to him moving in, a decision that seemed sensible at the time but would later be haunted by unimaginable regret. Lauren's mother had done what many single parents do, perform due diligence by introducing Brisbane to family members, observing his interactions with her daughter, and gradually integrating him into their lives. Neighbors would later recall seeing Brisbane doing yard work, attending school functions with Lauren's mother, and generally behaving as a supportive partner would be expected to. However, as is often revealed only after tragedy strikes, subtle tensions apparently existed beneath the surface. According to later testimony, Lauren had occasionally expressed discomfort about being alone with Brisbane. She sometimes mentioned that he would stare at her in ways that made her uncomfortable. These comments, which seemed minor at the time, would later take on devastating significance. As Lauren's mother worked her overnight shifts, the household settled into a routine. Lauren would typically be asleep before her mother left for work, with Brisbane presumably serving as the responsible adult in the home during those overnight hours. Neighbors later reported that they seemed like a normal family from the outside. People would see them coming and going, and nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary. This veneer of normalcy concealed whatever tensions might have been building inside the home, tensions that would explode into violence on a spring night in 2022, forever changing the lives of everyone connected to Lauren Juma. The first sign that something was wrong came in the early morning hours when Lauren contacted her family. At approximately 1 a.m., Lauren reached out to her mother and sister with disturbing messages that immediately raised alarms. According to court records, Lauren told her mother and sister that she had awakened to find Brisbane standing in her darkened bedroom, acting weird. This strange behavior frightened the teenager enough that she felt compelled to reach out for help. Lauren called her sister in a panic, explaining that Brisbane was standing in the dark, watching her. She was clearly frightened and asked if they could come get her. Her mother and sister immediately recognized the urgency in her communications. They responded by saying they would come to the house right away to pick her up. What followed was a race against time that they would tragically lose. While Lauren's mother and sister rushed to the home, Lauren remained on the phone with them. The fear in her voice escalated as the minutes passed. Through the phone, they could hear interaction between Lauren and Brisbane. Prosecutors would later reveal that the victim was on the phone with her family members when the defendant could be heard telling her to get off the phone. The last thing they heard was Lauren saying, "I'm sorry." Concerned for Lauren's safety, her sister contacted law enforcement while en route to the house. Deputies from the Harris County Sheriff's Office were dispatched to the address, but they would not arrive in time to prevent the tragedy that was rapidly unfolding inside. As Lauren's mother and sister sped toward the house, the situation inside was deteriorating rapidly. While still on the phone with Lauren, They could hear the confrontation between her and Brisbane escalating. They listened as he yelled at her, hearing the fear in Lauren's voice. Then he told her to get off the phone, and they heard her say, "I'm sorry." Those were the last words they would ever hear from her. What happened in the following moments would later be pieced together through forensic evidence and witness statements. Lauren's sister and mother arrived at the house just as the situation reached its horrific conclusion. As they pulled up to the residence, they reported hearing 2 gunshots from inside the home. Moments later, they witnessed Brisbane exiting the front door. Prosecutors would later describe how witnesses observed the defendant coming out of the residence, pulling up and adjusting his pants as he exited, a detail that would take on significant importance in the investigation. Inside, authorities would find a scene of unspeakable tragedy. Lauren Juma lay dead from gunshot wounds. According to court documents, her clothing was found in disarray, raising immediate concerns about whether additional crimes had been committed beyond the shooting. Detectives noted that the crime scene suggested multiple elements that required thorough investigation. The victim's state of dress and positioning raised significant concerns that would become central to the case against Brisbane. Medical examiners would later determine that Lauren had been shot twice. The precise sequence of events in those final moments remain part of the ongoing investigation, but what is clear is that a 16-year-old girl's life ended violently in what should have been the safety of her own bedroom. The response from law enforcement was swift once they arrived on scene. Harris County Sheriff's deputies secured the area and began the process of documenting what would quickly become classified as a homicide investigation. Deputies encountered Van Brisbane outside the residence and quickly took him into custody. According to police reports, officers noted signs of intoxication when they arrested him, a detail that would later become part of the prosecution's case. A sheriff's spokesperson confirmed that the suspect was detained without incident at the scene, with responding officers noting several indicators consistent with intoxication during the arrest. Inside, emergency medical personnel confirmed what Lauren's family already feared. Lauren Juma had succumbed to her gunshot wounds and was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner would later determine the cause of death to be multiple gunshot wounds. News of Lauren's death spread quickly through her community, sending shockwaves through her high school and neighborhood. By daybreak, the tragic story had become a headline across Houston news outlets, with reporters breaking the news that a 16-year-old girl had been shot and killed, allegedly by her mother's boyfriend. For Lauren's mother and sister, the nightmare was just beginning. Having witnessed Brisbane exiting the home and then discovering what had happened to Lauren, they were immediately thrown into the dual trauma of loss and the justice process. Family members would later describe how they went from trying to save her to identifying her body in just hours, an experience no parent or sister should ever have to endure. In the days following Lauren's death, the devastating impact on her family became increasingly apparent. For a mother who had left for work expecting to return to her daughter, the reality of her loss was incomprehensible. She described her daughter as beautiful and full of life, with her whole future ahead of her, a future now tragically cut short. Lauren's funeral drew hundreds of mourners, including classmates, teachers, and community members touched by the tragedy. Many of her fellow ROTC cadets attended in uniform to honor her memory and her aspirations to serve. School officials expressed how the entire school community was devastated by the loss of Lauren, who was described as a bright light at Nimitz High School, whose absence affected everyone who knew her. For Lauren's sister, the trauma was compounded by having heard her sister's final moments over the phone and arriving just moments too late to help. She described replaying those moments in her head constantly, wondering what they could have done differently, tormented by the thought that arriving just 5 minutes earlier might have changed everything. The psychological impact of such an experience is profound and often leads to what therapists call survivor's guilt, a phenomenon where those left behind question why they survived when others didn't, or in this case, why they couldn't prevent the tragedy. In the weeks following Lauren's death, her sister required professional mental health support to process the trauma of that phone call. She reported having recurring nightmares where she hears her sister's voice saying, "I'm sorry," over and over. Mental health professionals who specialize in traumatic grief explain that hearing a loved one's final moments creates a unique form of trauma, one where the brain constantly searches for ways the outcome could have been different. Lauren's sister has since become an advocate for emergency response protocols, speaking about how those precious minutes between Lauren's call and the arrival of help might have been shortened with different emergency systems in place. Lauren's room has been preserved by her family as a memorial to her life. Trophies, photographs, and personal mementos tell the story of 16 years that ended far too soon. Those close to the family have observed that they cannot bring themselves to change anything in her room, as if keeping it the same might somehow make this nightmare less real. The ripple effects of Lauren's death extended throughout her family. Younger cousins struggled to understand why Lauren was gone, grandparents mourned a grandchild they should never have had to bury, and family members grappled with how someone they had welcomed into their lives could commit such an unthinkable act. As one aunt expressed, their family will never be the same. There's a hole that can never be filled. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone, she should be here for all of it. Lauren Juma's tragic death fits into a disturbing pattern all too familiar to experts who study domestic and family violence. While not Lauren's biological father, Brisbane occupied a position of authority and trust in the household, a position that prosecutors allege he exploited in the worst possible way. Domestic violence experts point out that when examining households where a non-biological parental figure has authority over children, particularly teenage girls, there are unfortunately increased risk factors for abuse. These dynamics can create situations where power and trust are exploited, often with devastating consequences. Research from the US Department of Health and Human Services suggests that children living with unrelated adults are nearly 50 times more likely to die of inflicted injuries than children living with biological parents. This statistic doesn't mean that all blended families face these risks. The vast majority are loving, stable environments. However, it does highlight the importance of recognizing potential vulnerabilities. Criminologists who study family violence patterns note that teenage girls in particular may face unique risks in households with non-related adult males. The developmental stage of adolescence, combined with the authority dynamic between adults and minors, creates a complex power relationship that can be distorted by those with harmful intentions. Dr. Eleanor Ramirez, a forensic psychologist who has studied hundreds of cases involving violence against adolescents, explains that predatory behavior often begins with boundary testing, small violations of normal behavior that gradually escalate when unchallenged. Standing in a teenager's darkened room watching them sleep, as Brisbane allegedly did, represents a significant boundary violation that often precedes more serious offenses, she notes in her research on similar cases. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, approximately 1 in 7 children experience child abuse or neglect in a given year. Of particular concern are situations where children are left in the care of adults who may not have the same protective instincts as biological parents. Psychologists who study family dynamics emphasize that trust is a fundamental component in blended families. When that trust is violated, as alleged in this case, the betrayal is profound and devastating on multiple levels. It not only harms the immediate victim, but can create lasting trauma throughout the family system. Looking back, family members have expressed that while there were no obvious warning signs of violence, there were subtle indicators of discomfort that only became clear in hindsight. Lauren had mentioned feeling uncomfortable sometimes, but these comments weren't specific enough to make anyone think she was in danger. Now they wish they had recognized those small clues for what they might have represented. Experts emphasize that Lauren's case highlights the importance of listening carefully when young people express even vague concerns about adults in positions of authority over them. Child safety advocates note that teenagers often communicate discomfort in indirect ways. When they say someone is acting weird or creepy, adults should probe deeper to understand exactly what they mean by those terms. For families in similar situations, experts recommend establishing clear communication channels and safety plans, ensuring that children always have a way to reach out for help if they feel unsafe. These safeguards might have made a difference for Lauren, whose final desperate messages came too late for intervention. In the aftermath of this tragedy, Lauren Juma's memory lives on through those who loved her. Her high school established a memorial scholarship in her name, ensuring that her dreams of service will continue through others. Lauren's family has channeled their grief into advocacy, working with local organizations to raise awareness about teen safety and the importance of protecting vulnerable young people in blended family situations. Her mother has spoken about how, though she couldn't save her daughter, sharing Lauren's story might help save other children, something she believes Lauren would have wanted, given her desire to help others. The community response to Lauren's death has been profound. Annual remembrance walks, social media awareness campaigns, and community education programs all bear her name and image, a testament to how deeply her loss was felt beyond just her immediate family. Community organizers note that Lauren's story touched so many people because she could have been anyone's daughter, sister, or friend. Her legacy is helping to protect other young people from similar tragedies. Lauren's ROTC unit created a special honor in her memory, presenting her family with a flag and establishing an award for cadets who demonstrate the kind of dedication and spirit that characterized Lauren's approach to life. The Lauren Juma Spirit Award goes to cadets who embody what she stood for: determination, kindness, and unwavering loyalty to those they care about. At 16, Lauren Juma had only begun to discover who she would become. Her potential, her dreams, and her future were stolen in an act of violence that defies understanding. Yet through the memories of those who knew her and the changes inspired by her story, Lauren's influence continues. This has been Unveiled Truth. For resources on domestic violence prevention and family safety, please visit our website. Remember, if you or someone you know feels unsafe in their home environment, help is available through the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. For Lauren, and for all victims whose stories deserve to be told, we thank you for watching. Please subscribe to support our mission of bringing these important stories to light.